Hello and welcome to Relatable. This is your host, Teresa Freeman. A quick reminder that Relatable is now sponsored by TFA Soft Skills. Check out our website at www.tfasoftskills.com for exciting information, tips, and services. Enjoy this episode. Some of my best memories are with you in terms of the fellowship program. I really had such a great experience with that. And you were such a great mentor. And so made such a great impact on me. And I think, we had such a great relationship. Yes. And so I really am so thankful. And, since I first reached out to you, these big things have happened for you. Not that you weren't a VIP before.
Oh, right. Whatever.
But true statement. Yeah. But I feel like the timing of this actually has worked out really well, and you have a whole new role to talk about, and I'm fascinated and want to hear about how that's been going, and then lots of other good stuff if you're willing to go through the experience.
Happy to. And I know the team sent some stuff, but you know me, Teresa. I'm just going to talk, and we will figure out what makes sense to keep.
For sure.
I'm sure they'll yell at me for something.
Funny, and they didn't actually change that much, which is great.
Good. I don't even know what they changed. So,
It probably was the wording of my questions, just so that they're in present tense versus our active voices.
Oh my God, yes.
So let's start with your D&I role at Deloitte. Tell me how long you've been in it now. What, I think, just to give us some frame for the question, what is most exciting about the role, and what are some of the things that you've been surprised at, right? Going into that role, you probably had certain expectations. So tell me about that.
So I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Deloitte. And I also co-chair the Black Action Council, Teresa. So that is, one more it's an additional adjunct role, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I'll definitely talk about both. It's about a year that I've been in this spot. And as you know, it's quite a big change for me. I was someone who have done client service throughout my career, led practices, led big sectors and industries. And to take someone who was very much in the heart of the business and ask them to lead this, I think was a big shift. It was a really big shift, and definitely one that I didn't anticipate. So when I reflect on, I am an intuitive, inclusive leader, but not by training, right? Not by education. And so I was like, what? Where is this going? But I do think that came as a strength, right? And I think the people who tapped me on the shoulder and said, do this, had perspective that was, you need to understand what's happening both inside and outside the firm. And you need to understand how we operate to be willing to lead such change, right? And I think that was a big part of their thinking process as I got into the role. And the role has been a tough one, I'll be honest. It's not an easy role. It is not an easy role because the role requires you, first of all, the last 18 months, the social and racial injustices got everybody to a point of, whoa, what's happening? Are we truly understanding? Are we truly reflective? And for a firm like Deloitte, where we are so proud of our legacy in the DEI space, very proud, it was a moment of humility, right? It was a complete moment of humility, because while we celebrated everything we had done, we had to be humble about the moment that showed us how much remains to be done, right? And I think it was such an important reflective moment, and a moment where you could have, the fear could have taken the better of you, or you could have masked the set of issues. But I totally love the fact that we seized it and said, yes, this is the moment where we need to look ahead, we need to make changes, and we need to acknowledge where we are with transparency and humility. And we did. We published our first DEI transparency report, which was a moment of simply stating where we are and sharing it with everyone without trying to spin stories around it, but simply be factual about it, Teresa.
Yeah.
And really say, what is our journey forward? But it's important for us to remember that there's no state of nirvana in the DEI space. There's no such thing, right? There's always more work to do, always more work to do. And you just need to continuously push yourself to create sustained change, right? And keep moving forward.
How do you find, it's interesting when you said that because you have a perspective on the business, and then certainly you have a perspective, what is your background? What is your nationality? Talk.
So I am born and raised in India, Teresa. I came here as an immigrant for education. And as of August, it's 30 years exactly since I've come here. And I got on that plane without, it's hard to explain to my children or anyone listening. There was no internet. There was no email. There was no search up what SUNY Buffalo weather is, right? Because I came from India to Buffalo, had never seen snow before. But I took a leap of faith, and it's been an incredible journey for my own personal growth and my professional growth to take that. It was a land of opportunity. I came seeking opportunity. And, I was, so today I'm a US citizen. I'm a mom. I'm a woman in technology. I definitely, am Asian, of course.
You check a lot of boxes.
I definitely am those things, but those are all, those plus my lived experiences,
right.
The lived experiences being key, right, make me who I am today. And that to me, it's just been a great journey.
I definitely want to ask you more about that piece of it. Before we get there, I did have a follow-up question on your current role around disruption. So I'm being, as someone who was at Deloitte for a long time, and I loved every minute of it and had such a great experience. I will say that since I've left and I've been doing a lot of work with smaller businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, I'm seeing change happen quickly, and someone has an idea and it's easy to implement because it's not, a sizable, like Deloitte is a sizable organization with a lot of infrastructure that supports it. So for you in this role with real expectations to change how you're doing it or what it looks like, tell me a little bit just about that, because I suspect that that's not been entirely easy, or how do you do it, right? How do you almost have to become like an incubator within the firm, I'm thinking.
Right. So I totally agree with that. And by the way, that's probably the toughest part of the role. First of all, it's a role of influence, right? And a role of not a role where you have preordained, authority, if you will. So it is a role of influence, and you are in a position where you're trying to inspire change. But inspiring change for 125,000 people is not easy, right? It's definitely not easy. So how do you kind of think about that is hard. And, I mentioned the Black Action Council, Teresa. That was in some ways an incubation model. We zoned in and said, let's look at, by the way, the big shift in Deloitte and many companies probably, but definitely at Deloitte, was we decided to look at individual, group, and systemic behaviors, right? And the systemic dimension is extremely important, right? It's a very different lens. And, you could be doing a lot as an individual in a group, but if systems, policies, processes don't help, right, and don't create equitable outcomes, you really struggle to make progress. So that the equity equation and the equity imperative is a new lens to how we're approaching DEI. Mm-hmm. So when you ask small company, big company, mm-hmm. right, it is so true that it is extremely hard to move the Titanic a degree. But the big thing that we have been very clear on is while there is individual and group level cultural behavioral changes in this dimension, there's systemic changes that need to take place. And we've been able to have a lot of impact on the systemic dimension, Teresa, looking at how we approach DEI. By the way, another shift is DEI is just not about talent. And it is about embedding DEI in everything. And that was another reason I think having a business mindset helped in this role.
Yeah.
Like, how we do acquisitions, how we think about investments, how we think about supplier diversity, how we think about banking. Like, think about the amount of banking we do and bringing a DEI lens in that space. So really elevating DEI beyond just talent is another extremely important dimension.
And, it can't be, I don't think we can, I would be remiss if I didn't mention just the because of the magnitude, the impact that when you spend time in this space, that will allow others to follow, that will allow others to learn from what you're learning. Like, there is so many resources that have probably analyzed this, assessed this to the point that you're talking about it. I mean, that's the beautiful thing in terms of the Titanic, right? That you just have all these people on a common purpose trying to figure it out. So that's incredible. And when we sort of joined at the top of in this conversation, you were saying like everything is great and we're like blessed to be here and blessed to have the opportunity. I can really feel from you the energy around the role. And I think what a cool experience for you to be able to sidestep from the current service life and to try this new thing. So it's almost like there's lots of layers to this being an exciting opportunity, I would think.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, Teresa, the other thing that has been interesting and not something I anticipated is the degree of client time I actually spend in this role, because I'm not unique. Our company's not unique. My CEO, our board is not unique in that we're all trying to tackle it. So interestingly, I am very much with clients today, doing client service, but in a very different topic.
Yeah.
So it has redefined because we are solving together. And this is one topic that, the purpose dimension of it, the beauty is that everybody wants to help each other. There is not competitive elbows coming out on this topic. Everyone recognizes if you support one another, all ships rise in this space. So the degree to which our clients are engaging with us on this discussion, sharing ideas, sharing solutions, sharing pitfalls, right, has been phenomenal. And we're doing the same. It's a two-way dialogue to really work through, because there is no defined formula set that we can just go take out of the box and say, okay, tried and true.
Before we talk more about your path to this place, I am curious because you mentioned influence and it's on my list to talk to you about this. And in particular, my own observations of being around you and working with you. I'm definitely impressed with your ability to influence a certain outcome. And so when we were together, there was lots of opportunities to try to do that. We were part of a learning, I guess the best way to characterize it is a learning and development program, but that we were in the business trying to help solve some business problems. And so in your role at that time, what I observed is you were our sponsor and helping to negotiate and navigate those relationships with other leaders to try to figure out how we can best be successful in our pursuit of what we were trying to do.
Right.
Tell me how you cultivated and developed this skill around influence, and tell me what makes it work, and maybe what you see, even given since we've worked together, like what do you see holding people back, or it makes it difficult for them to be able to do it?
Yeah. So I think this concept of influence is an interesting one, but you have to start with the basics, right, Teresa? Mm-hmm. And the basics are relationship strength. Mm-hmm. And you can't forget that relationship strength is so critical. And relationship strength doesn't come with having coffee chats, right? They come with having shared experiences. You and I had a shared experience where we solved a set of things together and, solved it well, but we learned each other in the process. So I am a big believer, people talk to me about networking all the time. And I'm like, it's not networking without shared experiences doesn't create relationship strength. So I would highly encourage, right, that we build on ways to really work on relationship strength and how you do that. And the second thing is, it's not just about having a strong shared experience and then never watering that plant again. You have to remember to water the plant. And that requires deliberate, intentional actions to keep that plant alive over the years. I've been at Deloitte 23 years. It's not because I knew you 20 years ago that this worked. It's because we've watered the plant for each other. Right. And you have to remember to do that. And then that's step one. So I think influence requires strong relationship strength. The second thing is clarity and simplicity in what you're asking and why, and tying that to the purpose of you, purpose of the firm, right? To speak to you, right, is, I think, super important. So how do you become a leader who has that clarity, who has that vision, that is not just words, right? We're very good at pretty words. That's not enough. You have to appeal, right, to the individual so that you can move them. And moving them is the influence, right? It is not, I think people get caught up with influence being, I do something for you, you do something for, no, that's not, in my books, that's not influence, right? You're appealing to their inner purpose. You're appealing to who they are and how they want to lead. And you have clarity in what you're asking and why. And that, to me, moves the needle on influence.
It's so interesting. I'm working with some right now. I'm a coach and I'm helping them through something. And this very concept of this person wants something from someone else. It's a leader to them. It's kind of a fractured relationship.
Right.
And so we're talking through, how do you influence a decision and an outcome? And so what's interesting is, this person's very focused on what they need and want, right? That's natural. I think we're a human. It's just what we, right? And so sometimes when you come at people like on the nose, just about what you want and need, it doesn't work, right? So it's, what does the other person need and want? What does the other person value? Right? And so then you have a decision to make. Do you want to take that into consideration?
Right.
Because that is another set of skills. Or you maybe feel like you have to give up something if you're thinking in those ways, versus just going in guns a-blazing. It might not work. So it's just so interesting, that piece of what's the value, that clarity of thought of, how do I help you?
Yes.
How can I help you?
REAL-ATABLE is sponsored by TFA Soft Skills, your one-stop shop for workshops, coaching, speaking, and soft skills development. If you'd like to hire Teresa, visit www.tfasoftskills.com for more information.
It's interesting. I want to influence thinking. Mm-hmm. I don't get too caught up on influencing a specific outcome, right? Because when I can influence thinking, Teresa, I can help with sustainable change. If I get caught up on a particular outcome, I don't know that I'm changing the fabric and the DNA of the organization. So that's my lens on this, because I want someone who designs a onboarding process tomorrow to be thinking about equity themselves, right? I'm not going to get caught up on equitable outcomes for campus recruiting myself. I want them to think about that. So it's influencing their thinking, their beliefs, their purpose, right? Is almost what I focus on versus kind of a specific outcome.
And do you think, just in terms of missteps or what gets in people's way, what would you say it's the trying to only follow your own agenda? Do you think it's maybe not spending enough time? I think active listening is such an important part of influence too. So maybe it's a component of listening, but what else do you see, if I didn't mention it, that you think is getting in people's way?
Definitely active listening. I would totally agree with that. And not this whole concept of watering the plant. I'll come back to that. Because if you only show up when you want something.
People snip it out.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
So I am a believer that you got to work that, through and through, and deeply want it, right? Otherwise it's just, it becomes transactional. So approaching these moments as transactional moments, I don't think is the recipe for success.
Okay, so let's detour a little bit, because I'm fascinated by path and journey, and I'm fascinated by, and really the heart, if you ask me, of this conversation, of this podcast, is to help people understand that life is not a straight line, and that you navigate it's a circuitous path, right? Then so I'm curious for you, in terms of your own path, and once you got to this country, and that alone, in terms of just I don't know if it's a risk question as much as it is are you just someone that's pretty bold in the way that you go after things?
Right.
Just tell me a little bit about your path to Deloitte, and maybe if there's, and maybe it's, when you were in India, but any event or certain things that shaped how you are today, right? Or how you've gone after things.
So I think the big thing for me was inner happiness, just happiness and joy. And I was just raised to constantly have a barometer of where I am on that. And if there are things that give me joy, the things that give me happiness are not in the equation, to work to change it, not to wait for tomorrow, not to wait for, a year from now. And don't get me wrong, that's not about not accepting tough times or anything like that. It is, I've had my fair share of ups and downs, just like everybody, right? But this desire to always, continuously seek to get better and to reach a level of personal joy and personal happiness motivates me, Teresa. And it is something that my father played a huge role. He felt that I could seize the world if I wanted to, and he wanted to be super supportive of that. I came from a culture where, that was not at that time, where women were homemakers, right? And that's awesome, by the way. I love the choices people make, but that he knew that that was not for me alone. And I'm a homemaker today. Remember, I have multiple roles and it's a part of my identity, but that alone was not going to be enough. And he highly encouraged me to try different things and to be bold. And sending me across the oceans in a very different time was his way of opening the world of opportunity for me. And it was highly supportive parents, and a family that was willing to see me jump.
Did you want to go? Were you nervous to go?
I was nervous to go, but honestly, I don't know that that's actually an accurate response. I was not nervous to go. I was almost naive about what is on this other end. Like, lack of ignorance is bliss, they say. And, I was willing, had the courage. I was, definitely always bold to jump. But, I don't know that I really knew what was on the other end. One of my favorite quotes, Teresa, lately is, if you are afraid to jump, then jump afraid. And it pretty much summarizes who I am. And it's a Viola Davis quote. And I just love it. I think it is exactly the kind of personality I've been. Yes, I was afraid to jump, but I jumped afraid, but I would not jump. So it is, those have been the moments. And, coming to the US, it was about an education, and education provided opportunities was how I was raised. It gives you the ability to, see what could be in very different ways. And, I pursued an undergrad degree, computer science, and I then did my master's in computer science, and I've done my MBA. So definitely, the desire to learn has been a big aspect. But I will say, here again, curiosity to learn is important.
Yeah.
But courage to unlearn is very, very important. And that's how you grow as a leader.
Did you find that, like, the academics, given what you just shared, did that come very easy to you, or is it something that you had to work hard at?
People who observe me say it came easy to me. In a family that I was raised, I worked twice as hard as my brother, as an example. So it's all relative.
Right.
All relative. I have a very strong work ethic. I do. I work really hard, and it's just in me. Like, it is in me, very much how I'm wired. With a strong work ethic.
It's interesting. It just made me think of this too, around work ethic. I think sometimes what is forgotten maybe is that people enjoy work. So this idea that work ethic, I think sometimes has like
this negative connotation.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's negative, but I love to work too. And so it's interesting. We've had some personal challenges throughout this last year, and it's been interesting to me to sort of see where I've had to like pull back on certain things.
Right.
And I realized like how much I just love working. Like it's such a happy place for me, and it brings me joy. And so it almost feels like almost
it doesn't
unfair.
Feel like work.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. But I think, we talk a lot on this, in this podcast and on the show around, you find the thing that you love, you find the thing that you're naturally curious about. And then it just, like you said, it doesn't really feel like work, or it doesn't, you just, so tell me a little bit then too, given what you said around being, being female, being in tech, being from India. And then certainly I know Deloitte has a very positive culture in the D&I space, relative to sort of the rest of the US anyway, like always fast forward, kind of cutting edge. But tell me, for you, how, as a female leader and as someone that I think has been involved, in some shape or form, whether it was your day job or not.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Tell me, just for you as a woman, how your career has been, or if there's been certain milestones or moments that have made you more impassioned about it, or it impacted you.
So I think it's pretty personal, right? Like I have had some amazing sponsors in my journey. Amazing, Teresa. And they have played a huge role in my journey. But I will tell you, my journey is also about choice. I have, comparison, by the way, is the death of joy. This is my true belief. But I will tell you, like, when you look at my journey, to your point on, a lattice, or really looking at things where you move laterally before you move up, etc. It has been about choices. It's about what I've wanted at specific times in my career and the choices I've made. I don't also like the word sacrifice. I like the word choice because choice to me is you're conscious about what you're picking when and why it's right for you. And I totally picked, for instance, I made a choice of geography versus industry at a certain point in my career. And that was for life events and very much about being a mom, very much about the choices I wanted and made. And each of those times I've made choices, right? I've made those choices in a very intentional, deliberate way, and they have served me well. So I do think, though, I seize these moments, and I don't know, like I had people ask me, when you see yourself, do you see yourself as different? Do you see yourself as an Asian Indian immigrant woman in technology? And I will tell you, I don't know that I do. I see myself as someone here to have impact every day. It's not that those parts are not very deeply parts of my identity, but it's not necessarily the first thing that comes to mind in terms of how I approach work or approach, the effectiveness of the impact I'm having every day. So those moments have been very good moments. Where I felt sponsored, felt the empowerment and the support to take big, deep, courageous actions, and they worked out well.
So it's interesting. You just made me think of something, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask. Do you feel like you've ever been held back because you're a woman?
I do not.
And it's so interesting because I don't either. What I think held me back was me.
Yeah.
So I think, that there's a construct, and granted, I also was very fortunate to be in a industry or, in professional services where I think it was a more mature, evolved workspace. And I'm not saying it didn't happen. And I'm not saying that there weren't times that perhaps there was certain behaviors that I thought, this is peculiar and probably not.
Like
if a guy was treating a guy like this, it would be off. Like that kind of stuff happened to me. But in terms of I think getting promoted or opportunity, to your point around choices, I would almost self-select out, or my own voice would hold me back versus there was some other person kind of keeping me from being the best me.
Yeah, I totally see it that way. But it's not that there have not been some systemic challenges. We could talk a little bit about things I've reflected back on, that I've learned that I could have done better. And I will tell you, it's in the space of microaggressions, Teresa. I have experienced microaggressions. I think because they're micro, my response was to put them in a drawer and, put them in a drawer and put it in there and close it away. But what I will tell you, and I will tell listeners, is microaggressions need to be tackled as individual, in the individual moments, because when you open the drawer a year from now, you look at the collective impact of those, and they have worn on you, right? They have most definitely worn you out. So, and again, a lot of the times you're like, oh, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to bring attention to myself. I don't want to make a big deal. But you also have to change the frame that you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for generations to come. And when that frame shifts in your mind, that this is not just about you, KP, right? It is about who's the next person who's experiencing this. And by the way, that has got nothing to do just with gender or persons with disability or veterans. It's a variety of reasons, that may not even have to do with identity elements, right? It definitely is something. And what I find is I talk about this concept of courage being contagious. And if I have the courage, I see the next person and the next person, right? And courage is truly contagious, Teresa. So if I reflect back on what I've learned and what I want generations to be better about is to really think about calling in or calling out microaggressions.
If you'd like to advertise with REAL-ATABLE, please email us at info@tfasoftskills.com for more information.
It's interesting. I had a conversation the other day with someone where there was a microaggression that had occurred and it was gender-based, and you knew the intent was not negative. Yet and I'm in a position being in an HR capacity that it's completely appropriate for me to have a conversation with this person. Yet I even was reluctant because I knew the intent was not negative, yet it was on me to educate, and it was on me to call it out. And so we had the conversation, and it was a little bumpy of a start because the person was defensive and was like, you don't understand. I didn't mean that. It's like, well, it's not necessarily what you meant, but it's what you said. And we ended in this really good place, and it was a really good conversation. And I hung up and thought, so many times we assume malintent, or we assume someone meant something and they didn't. And so when you do directly address it and you have that conversation, it just goes such a long way.
Right. It really does. It really does. And there's an art to doing that. There's definitely an art to doing that. And the more comfortable you get, right? Because there again, it's unlearning some things, right? It's, how much ever we talk about learning, we don't talk about unlearning. And unlearning is an important part of leadership behavior that we have to continue to work on.
Like unlearning, and also what could you do differently, right? Framed like, how could you change this? How could you do it differently next time? Let's talk a little bit just about, for people that are listening. I mean, Deloitte is certainly a career destination. It's a competitive place to be at. There's a lot of people that are interested in professional services. There's a lot of people that would love to have the same type of career that you've had, or be in a senior leadership role. Tell me a little bit about what helps someone to be successful, right? And within the construct of Deloitte, and then maybe even a step further around some of the leadership characteristics and opportunities that we've talked about. So tell me, when you look at either your own experience, or obviously you've been a mentor to a lot of people, what are some of the things that you see that if someone's aspiring to that type of career or trying to get into Deloitte, what should they be thinking about, or how should they be developing those skills?
So I think very easy question, Teresa. My brain is totally processing. So I think the big thing in my mind that comes first is be the master of your craft. You cannot lose that dimension, right? Like what has happened over the years, I worry, is a little bit of layering of soft skills to the degree where people are forgetting being a master of your craft is still important. And, invest in that and, recognize your credibility comes from being really good at your craft, right? And whatever that craft is, whether it's in technology, it could be whatever it is. I don't even want to go through examples, but become really good at your craft. Then the second thing I would say is recognize that it's important to always understand how your craft fits with the purpose of the organization, right? What is the value? Like your ability to communicate impact and value of your craft in the context of what it means, right, to your organization and to your clients. In Deloitte, that's a big deal, right? Our clients is front and center, I think is probably the second thing. The third thing is do not underestimate how much this is a team sport. So having sponsors, having great leaders to learn from, having mentors, having allies, right, is super important. And, you have to continue to do those things in a regular basis, which comes back to relationship development, right? Relationship strength as well. And, all of that layered with do not ever hesitate to be your biggest advocate. I do not have any hesitation to advocate the work that I engage in, the value that the team brings. And, that to me is important, is super important, because in a sea of 125,000 people, if you don't get seen, you have a role to play in being seen and being valued and recognized. So those are the things I would say.
How would you, this is maybe tough, but how would you coach someone or tell someone to balance between the team collaborative nature of consulting and professional services, because it is very much a team, you do everything as a unit, sort of juxtaposed to the competitive nature of what it means to be successful in that organization, because ultimately not in every role, but let's just talk on the consulting, on the services side of the business, on the client service side, the work you win, the work you deliver, right? That ultimately starts to create your path. So how do you balance those two things? What would you say? Can you have one without the other, right? Like, how do you put team first if you need to be somewhat competitive to stand out?
It's interesting. My philosophy, Teresa, is give credit away. It has actually served me personally really well. Just give credit away. And it's fascinating how the universe then speaks back with making sure you shine, right? Like one other concept that I talk about is basking in other people's sunshine. Yes, you create your own sunshine, but learn to bask in other people's sunshine as well, because it's a great source of strength. It's a great source of, really creating team spirit. And for me, when my team shines, I know I'm shining. I know whether or not it is, individually credited or not, it just propels you. It's a stronger force that propels you forward. So that I'm not, and, again, I want to balance it to the point I made. You have to advocate for the impact you're having. You have to be able to tell stories about the value your team is bringing. But it is not in my mind, letting that happen at the team level has served personally me very well in getting the recognition and the opportunities to get, to progress.
The one thing that I love about the model, the apprenticeship model, right, which is if you come in right out of school and you get that opportunity to grow within the construct that's there, it makes so much more sense, right? When you grow in it, because then it's the pay it forward, right? And what somebody did for you, you get to do for the person behind you. And it's a really cool when it's working well and the kind of right people are in the right place, it's a really neat thing to see. Let's talk. I just have a couple more. So one question, and I think I had it framed earlier that I was going to ask you just about a mistake, but I think what I'd prefer to ask you is just developmentally for you.
Yeah.
What do you think you've spent the most time developing in yourself professionally? Like, is there one thing that sort of shows up a bit?
Yes.
That you're like, okay, I've got, this is something that's like, not you said, everybody's got different strengths that they're working through. So what's something that you're tackling or that you try to tackle and you've seen some growth for yourself?
I would say I've been at Deloitte 23 years. I've been at the US 30 years. If there's one thing I've consistently worked on is the art of communication. And written, verbal, absolutely how to do it authentically, how to do it with clarity and conviction, right? In a way that, reaches people, in a way that inspires people. And it doesn't stop, Teresa. Even today, I feel like I'm continuously working on that aspect. So I have seen personal growth in the space. I feel my own personal growth in the space, but I also see that I have to continue working on it. I just, that's what I would tell you.
And what do you see in terms of other talent that's coming in, right? Would you say that's also somewhat underdeveloped in the people that are coming in, right?
Yes, absolutely.
The writing. Is really interesting. Just and again, I don't think it's, there's no blame. It's just a product of the times, right? And how people are being groomed and educated. There's just a lot less emphasis or time on that. So maybe that dovetails to this other question. I have just two more for you. One, I think that I'm a soft skills enthusiast. You may or may not know that, but and interestingly, in my career in HR and what I've observed is that people struggle. And, you talked about collaboration before, this art of communication, I think influence. So maybe it is communication, maybe it's a ditto answer. I am curious, when you think about critical soft skills that are required to be successful in professional services, what are those, if there's more than one?
I would say the art of giving and receiving feedback.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if that's high on your list of things you promote, Teresa, but it is high on my list, right? And, people often say, giving feedback is not being kind. No. It is actually the kindest thing you could do. Feedback is a gift. And it is, in my opinion, both giving and receiving feedback. Your ability to receive feedback is so important in developing yourself as a leader. And, even the vibes you give out and whether you're willing to receive feedback, right, is such a big leadership trait. So, that to me is what I would say is something that is all of us can continue to do better on.
How many times has someone come to you and you have said to them, well, have you told them? Like they come to you about another situation And
right.
you ask the question, have you discussed this with this, and they're like, no, right? Because it's that human, it's avoidance. I don't know what gets in the way, but certainly for sure people are hiding.
Yeah. And it is, recognize that it is the best thing you could do for them. Right. It is a gift you can give them. And it is, you being a leader, a peer leader, or a senior leader, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. Like it is, I think that to me, and your ability to do it in a more real-time fashion is even like there's a timing element to it.
Yeah. It's an investment, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a timing element to it too. So I think, I continue to push myself on this topic.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to come full circle before we wrap here, as you look out ahead, you've talked about some of the things in your not so new now DEI role and your Black Action Council. Did I get that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me some of the goals or what success looks like and what, I don't know. You remember Laura Rothy? We used to talk a lot about the shower test, right? You get up in the morning, you have the shower test. Like I want to, I'm ready for the day versus like, you get up, take your shower, you want to get back in bed. So what's the shower test for you? What gets you excited about what's ahead? And so when we check in with you in a year, you can give us an update.
So couple of things. Yeah. I measure my success in a given day by thinking about, have I made someone open their mind, push their thinking, or made them uncomfortable even, Teresa? So because I feel if I have not, it is that I haven't pushed enough on the dimension of change, on the dimension of flipping orthodoxies, on the dimension of, breaking barriers or historic, systemic, right, as the case might be. So I think a lot about that on a given day. Have I done enough of that? And that's something that I measure kind of the impact of a day by. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but have I made anybody uncomfortable on this topic? It's a great measure for me. But when I look long-term, right, I think a big aspect of the journey and success in the space of DEI is obviously the concept of equity and driving equitable outcomes, both inside and outside the organization. The second thing is it's not just about representation, which I think people get caught up because it becomes a numbers game, but what is the experience of the individuals, right? In your organization? Is their talent experience truly off the charts, right? Just as much as, or at parity to others. I think that to me is, the sentiment and the experience is as important as the representation. And probably the third thing I would say is that we are continuously, helping allies, helping leaders, helping everyone in the organization recognize that this is a business imperative and not just a social imperative, Teresa. The more people get that, the more progress we will make, right? The more progress we will make. So those are some things I think about when I think about what success looks like.
You're like a shapeshifter. You're like a mind shapeshifter. I love it. I love it.
Oh my God, I like it. I'll take that.
Yeah, it's good.
Mind shapeshifter. I love it. And thank you for being my friend for all these years.
Ditto. Thank you. Yes. It's so great to see you. I'm so appreciative of your time. I really feel like this was it's enjoyable for me, which and I'm sure it will be too for the people that listen, but I feel like we got to touch on a lot of different things and components of your experience, which has been great. And I'm just so thankful. It's so good to see you. I wish we were in person.
Yes, I know, but we'll catch up soon. All right.
Thank you so much. Hi there, I'm Teresa Freeman. Thank you so much for visiting the TFA Soft Skills YouTube channel. Please click on subscribe so that you can have access to all of our great content and interviews. Until next time, stay connected.